What's up, guys? This is Pete, aka Cowthers, back from vacation, holiday, whatever you want to call it. Went away for a few weeks. I was turning 30, and my girlfriend nicely took me out of the country so I could forget about the fact that I was old and go to theme parks and stuff like that. So that was fun. But now we're back on the grind, on the coaching, podcast making, video making, the whole life of the poker guy. So apologies if you missed the Carrot Poker podcast there for a few weeks, or you worried that it may have ceased to exist indefinitely. That is not the case, I can assure you. We are back now. We're going to do some more hands from the corner today just to ease us back into the flow of podcast making. And I'm going to make a pledge to you guys right now that the Carrot Poker podcast will be coming out on Thursday or Friday around that time of every single week. And if I'm going to be away, I will record an extra one the week before, because I feel like I've had a lot of emails from you guys, from listeners, saying like this is their main source of strategy and lots of lovely stuff like that, to which I'm very, very grateful for that. But it's only right that in exchange I ensure that I'm actually giving you guys regular content. You're not having to check all the time and be like, oh man, I wonder when that characters guy is going to make another one. So updates, the Grinder's Manual, my poker book, has been selling pretty well actually. Really good feedback and reviews so far. Thank you to any of you who have left me reviews on my 2+2 thread. You can check that out actually under books and publications and on 2+2 if you want to have a look at the reviews that have been posted there. And it's on sale at my website, carrotcorner.com, as well as the Kindle version, which came out a few weeks ago, which is selling on Amazon. But if you like my podcast and want to support my work and are kind of indifferent to which book you buy, please do get the PDF from my website, because I, the little man, make more money from that instead of Amazon like crushing me and taking all of my profits if you buy the Kindle version. But obviously, if you want the Kindle version, buy it, buy the version that you want. Anyway, so otherwise, I'm planning another book in the future. It's going to be a massive collection of hands, much similar to the Hands from the Corner podcast. Actually, I'm going to be using maybe like 100 hands from students, and I'm literally just going to go through in the whole book and just provide it as like a question and answer kind of book, like a quiz book, because I've had a lot of requests from people who have read the Grinder's Manual who are looking for more practice examples. So instead of going through chapter by chapter and doing a bunch more of those, which might just suck my will to live completely, I think what I'd rather do is just get some random interesting hands, and they will cover all the material in the Grinder's Manual. I hope, if I've succeeded, because the Grinder's Manual is a book about all of poker. It's a comprehensive textbook in No Limit Hold'em 6 Max Online. So I will get on that shortly and hopefully release that within hopefully 6 months. I don't think it should take me more than half a year, but I'm going to get to work on that ASAP. Anyway, so let's do some hands for today. I'm going to scroll down my group here and pick a hand that I think looks fairly reasonable. So we're going to start off with a 50 no limit hand. So this is played at 50 NL, and basically we are 5-handed, and hero is in the big blind with ace-7 of diamonds. And the student who's posted this starts off by saying, playing a draw versus a stationary fish. That's the kind of title of the hand. Not sure if I could have played this one in a better way, is the question, which is always good. It's always good to get a line check, even if you feel like you played the hand kind of standardly, like it played out, relatively normally for the way you would normally play that hand. You want to get a line check and make sure that your common thoughts about that common spot are not completely wrong, because they're going to be reciprocated, they'll be repeated over and over again, and obviously the common spots in poker are the ones that add up to give you the worst. If you're making mistakes in those spots, will give you a pretty bad win rate, will hurt your win rate the most because they occur so frequently. So, don't know if this is one of these spots or not, but anyway, so pre-flop, what happens is that the cutoff, who is 59-2, he must be the stationary fish in question here, seems to be like the looser player at the table. 59-2 is kind of like passive whale, I would say. Like, the guy is almost certainly a little bit stationary post-flop. You will still have fold equity against this kind of player, like 59-2 on average. Like, they play such a wide range pre that they do just have to fold a lot on the flop, so don't think that you can never c-bet against these guys. That's just one common misconception I'd like to get out of the way. But nevertheless, you can expect a 59-2 to have more stationary tendencies post-flop than a 35-4 or something like that. And the simple reason for that is just deductive logic. I mean, if someone is playing 59% of hands, that means that they like to limp things like king-6 off or whatever, or like 7-4 suited. And so what that kind of means is that they just have this sort of innate tendency, this kind of longing to just not want to fold, to see flops, to see the next card. So you can expect a bit less fold equity in general than you would against like a more standard fish of like 40-11 or something like the normal passive fish kind of range. Anyway, so pre-flop we have ace-7 suited in the big blind and cut-off limps and small blind completes. Now, this is a spot that you should absolutely isolate in when you have a suited ace here, in my opinion, because, like I just said, just because someone is a little bit more stationary on average doesn't mean that they won't still miss loads and loads of flops completely when they have a VPIP of 59. Remember that 59 as well probably doesn't contain the very best hands. He has got a 2% PFR, so you might limp big pairs sometimes, but you can discount stuff like ace, king, ace, queen, jacks plus here pretty comfortably. And so you're dealing with a range that is 59% of hands excluding the top, so like going from the kind of excluding the top 2% going downwards to like what would be 61% of total hands, but you're excluding the top 2% basically, which is a really, really wide range. It's really weak. So when you isolate here, the small blind, by the way, as well, you don't really need to worry about. His completing range is insanely capped. His position is terrible. He just can't do anything to you. He cannot interfere with your game plan of isolating the stationary fish in any way whatsoever. And you don't want to be going three-way to a flop with this hand because you lose two things. One, you lose a lot of fold equity because when you've built it up and isolated the cutoff limper, which is what's going to happen the vast majority of the time as long as you go big enough with your ISO, and that's key, I'll come to that in a minute. When you've isolated the cutoff, your head's up. There's only one hand that you need to fold out, so when the board comes like 8-6-3, it's just very likely that the player has missed that flop. Don't fall into the trap of the fish flop fallacy that I talk about in the Grinder's Manual, my book, which is the belief that fish will always hit low boards because they play lots of ragged, crappy cards that regs wouldn't play. This is just nonsense because you need to think about ranges proportionately. Like, yes, the fish will play like 8-6 off, whereas a reg wouldn't. But if he's playing that, he's surely playing like king 8 off and queen 7 off and, you know, ace 4 off. And just the point is that when someone has a wide enough range to connect with 8-4 deuce in like a meaningful way, then they also just have even more hands that miss that. This is still no limit hold'em. Most hands miss most flops. Playing lots of ragged small cards does not entitle you to often hit a dry, small, raggedy, disconnected board, or any board for that matter, because you are such a fish that you have a 60 VPIP, right? You're just not going to connect well with anything. So, first mistake Hero makes here is that he checks the big blind. The reasoning here is I don't raise from big blind as I will have very little fold equity on the flop. See, this is the problem. There's no good reason for supposing that you'll have very little fold equity, and the second clause that he stipulated here is, and I'm likely to be in a multi-way pot out of position. Well, you are if you check. If you check, you're certainly always going to be in a multi-way pot out of position, but if you raise, the small blind has a really weak capped range that if you make it like 5.5x here, he just can't do anything about it. You want to raise here and raise big. You want to make it like at least 5x. You want to make it a price that the small blind can't just like click call with queen 6 suited and try and connect and hit 2 pair plus. And the small blind, by the way, looks like a reg, so you can absolutely just make him fold. If he was also a fish, he would kind of inadvertently, by playing horribly and calling your 5x raise, make raising unprofitable, because then you would be three-way. Having to c-bet into two kind of fishy players is not ideal out of position with only mediocre frequent strength in the form of ace-7 suited. Frequent strength, by the way, is the measure of a hand's ability to connect often with flops. So ace-7 suited is not the best, but it's certainly not the worst. It's a lot better than ace-7 off, but it's not as good as ace-10 suited. So, you know. So anyway, you will be in this spot if you don't ISO. And that's not the end of the world. It's very plus EV to check here, but I think it's even higher EV to go ahead and isolate. Because there's just no reason to think that a 59-2 is going to be all that stationary. Like, sure, he will be a bit more stationary than the average fish, like I've said, but most hands miss most flops, most fish fold, most air. You can make lots of these most clauses that are going to just lead you to think that he's going to fold a lot on the flop. So you should isolate, you should build up, you should take it down. Also, when you do connect well, it's nice to have built a bigger pot to start getting some money into. So I absolutely think that position and the kind of mediocrity of ace-7 suited and the fish's kind of slight tendency nature are not enough to deter us from isolating, and not enough to mean that isolating is not the best play here. So I would raise up to like $2.50, $2.65, something like that, just over 5x. Get heads up with the fish and just c-bet half pot on most boards, as long as it's not like super wet where you have no equity. Like, okay, if it comes down like Jack 10-8 of hearts, your ace-7 of diamonds is going to be terrible. You're going to have hardly any fold equity there. You've got awful gut shot. You should just check, hope to bink a 9 of spades and hope that it's good. But on most boards, I mean, a 60% VPIP range that excludes the top few percent of hands is just going to really struggle to defend. Like, just because someone's stationary doesn't mean they just call like random queen high, and you don't even know this guy's stationary. All you know is that he's got a slight propensity to play more hands than the average fish does pre-flop. So let's isolate. I think I've made that point, beaten it to death. So yeah, let's move on. So flop is king 10-5 with 2 diamonds. So king of diamonds, 5 of diamonds, 10 of clubs, and we go ahead and flop the flush draw. Small blind, the reg, actually leads out here, and it's just a pain in the ass having him in the pot. Like, I really just feel disgruntled that he's even in the pot in the first place. I'd rather he wasn't, but oh well. So small blind leads for $1.12 here, and Hero decides to raise to $2.99. I think this is really terrible. Like, I think this is like probably one of the worst situations you could ever want to raise a nut flush draw in. It just doesn't make any sense, and the reasoning for that is that you've got a fish behind you. You still have the cutoff, and you have the nut flush draw. Your money here in this 3-way pot, this reg is led out into 2 players. He doesn't have that weaker range. You don't have that much fold equity with the fish behind as well on a kind of coordinated board. And you don't want fold equity here. What you want here is implied odds, because you have a nut flush draw. You'd love the fish to draw to a dominated hand like a worse flush draw or a straight draw to come along with top pair. Why give a player who you think is stationary a reason to just fold right away on the flop with gut shots, with second pair, with all that crap that he's going to have so often? I mean, a fish here is going to have all kinds of just like 10-7 off. He's going to just have hands that you completely are going to annihilate if you get there. But if the fish does have top pair and you raise here, he's probably not going to fold that, and you know, why give yourself a worse price to draw to your flush here? Like, you want to make your hand, then you want to get lots of money into the pot here. This is not a spot where going after fold equity is superior to just like increasing your implied odds. How do you increase your implied odds in a hand? Two things. Well, you can increase the right hand side of the ratio, which is your investment, which is what we're doing here by just calling instead of raising. Or you can increase the left hand side by just being against stronger ranges, being against stationary players. That takes care of itself. So to make implied odds better here, we just basically want to keep our investment small. We want to call the lead of 112 into 150. We want to allow the fish behind us to come along so that on the turn, you know, we can get there and we can make a bunch more bets. We can leave him in the pot. We do not want to blow this player out of the pot. Like, the line of bet, raise is really strong. Like, even to a fish. Sorry, I'm just going to like turn my devices onto silent because I just started getting messages. And all my millions of devices, i.e. my phone and my iPad, started going berserk. Apologies about that noise. So yeah, like, you just don't want to blow anyone out of the pot here. You don't want to go after fold equity. You want to make your hand and then get lots and lots of value. The line of bet, call, raise, right? So when one player leads, another player then raises. Like, that looks really strong to a fish. So this fish who's acting behind you, like, he's not even put in one bet yet. And you might deter him from even putting in one bet when he has like a weak king, a 10, a gut shot, maybe even like an open-end straight draw sometimes. So you just absolutely have to call this flop, for sure. Hero's reasoning, and it's always good. It's not good enough just to be like, well, you made a mistake, you played that street badly, you should have done X instead of Y. What you need to do is look at the reasoning. What are the culprit thoughts? This is where we do culprit thought analysis, and we look at like, what thought did Hero think at the time of the hand or afterwards in his analysis that led him to make this mistake of raising the flop instead of calling. Well, Hero writes, good flop for us. We will probably not have enough fold equity, but still I think raising is good as we build a pot, and together with implied odds, I think this is okay. Yeah, but you need to remember that implied odds are a function of your investment compared to what you stand to win. So when you raise here, the thing that Hero's not realised is that he actually butchers his implied odds. He makes them much, much worse. Implied odds here could be on average like, I don't know, 20 to 1 here if he, okay, that's a bit extreme. Maybe 20, 25 to 1 here, 15 to 25 to 1, right, somewhere around there. That's how much you're going to get paid off extra if you call here. If you call this $1 bet, you're going to make like, what, 15 to 25 bucks on average, let's say, somewhere around there. But if you raise and you throw in $3 like Hero does here, well, now your investment's 3 times as much, and now your implied odds are basically slashed to pieces. For one, you also blow out hands that you could be getting paid off by, you know, butchering your implied odds more. So you actually ruin implied odds in 2 ways here when you raise. One, you give yourself that worst price, and the number on the right hand side of the ratio grows, the amount you need to invest, and that's really bad. And on the other hand, you actually blow hands out of the pot that could have paid you off on the turn and river because they also improve when you improve, etc. So yeah, you need to remember that implied odds are nothing to do with just how much you'll stand to win, but they're also to do with how much you're investing. And honestly, like, sure, you do build a pot here with a nut flush, but what if you get 3-bet on the flop? Like, the fish is gone from the hand, you get 3-bet by the reg, or there's just loads of bad branches where the fish folds. You just don't want that at all here. It's such a lucrative drawing situation just to play your hand kind of fit or fold as a chase, if you like, rather than as some kind of going after fold equity hand. I really don't like raising, as I've said a billion times. So Hero also says we probably have 12 outs, question mark. Well, depending on whether your ace is good. I mean, honestly, your ace is not going to be good that often. It makes 2 pairs, it makes straights. I think treat this as a kind of 9-out draw. What you're looking to do here is make a flush, not make top pair on ace, king, 10, 5, as it would be if the ace came on the turn. So treat it as a 9-out draw that you're going to play for implied odds, and play just like fit or fold, basically. It's just much better. But I think I should have bet bigger here, maybe 4 or 5. Like, why? All you're going to do then is just further enhance your mistake. Like, the fish's range is going to get blown out of the pot even more. Basically, the Hero's main thought process reasoning here is that his priorities here are just all wrong. He's like going for building a huge pot as if he's got plus 50% equity, like he's got like 70% equity or something. Like, it's a flush draw. With 9 outs, it's got like at best like 40% equity in the hand. Probably less than that, given that the ace is very rarely any kind of out. So, I mean, it's not a very high equity hand, but it is a hand that does extremely well, like just over a third of the time when it actually gets there. But that's the key, just over a third of the time without much fold equity. Or even if you do have some fold equity, you don't want it, you just rather play this kind of fit or fold chasing manner against the fish. That's where all your EV is going to come from here, trust me. So don't go bigger. Like, if you're going to raise your sides, it's fine, but I definitely wouldn't raise. Anyway, on to what happens here is that small blind has led, Hero's raised to $2.99. Small blind led for $1.12 into $1.50. Hero raises for $2.99. Cutoff calls and small blind calls. So the cutoff does come along, but now we've invested way more than we needed to for that to happen. We get to the turn. The turn is a brick, as it will be like 4 out of 5 times. The turn is the 4 of clubs. Small blind checks and we bet 6. We're 3-way here. Nothing has changed and we just have no fold equity, right? So betting this turn card is just a mistake, because I didn't mean to pick a hand that I thought Hero played badly on every street, by the way. It's just coming that way, that it's just turning out that way that I want to suggest improvements on every street here. But that's good, that's lots of learning to be done. So what you've done on the flop is you've loaded the big pot with around 35-40% equity, very little fold equity. Now when the 4 of clubs turn comes, you have even less fold equity against the fish. Like, it's just very unlikely that the 59-2 player, who I said will be a bit more stationary than the average fish, is going to go ahead and now just fold on the turn, having called the flop and the turn's been a brick. And the fish has cold called a raise on the flop as well, so clearly he has something that in his fish mind he's quite fond of. So to think that he's going to fold this turn, 4 of clubs turn, often at all is a hugely optimistic delusion, and it's just not going to happen. So Hero should actually check here. The small blind is checked. Hero should check, basically hoping for a free card, because when you don't have fold equity, you do not want to shovel money into the pot with what is now like 20% equity. It's just ludicrous. You don't want to do that. If you had fold equity, then maybe you do, but 3-way against the 59-2 who's cold called a flop raise on a blank turn, these are all massive warning signs that there is no fold equity here whatsoever. So trying to be aggressive in this spot is just completely misplaced, ill-timed aggression. You definitely just want to check the 4 of clubs turn, try to get a free river here, and basically extract money. Again, it's like, just because you've made one mistake doesn't mean you need to compound that mistake on the turn. Like, yes, raising flop was an error, but betting turn is a far graver one. What you want to do is say, okay, I got this wrong on the flop. If you can figure that out in game, it's not easy to know instantly when you're making mistakes, because obviously you thought it was the right choice or you wouldn't have done it. But in hindsight, I suppose what you want to do in the turn is say, okay, I probably, at this point, I'm now realizing that I have, or even had, very little fold equity on the flop, and certainly have very little on the turn, and now I want to play my hand in a kind of face-up, just defeatist, if you like, manner, because that's the most plus EV thing to do, and just try to get a free river, enhance implied odds as much as you can by not paying anything to see the river. That gives you like infinite implied odds, if you like, as a ratio. You know, if you invest $1 to win 18 on average, that's 18 to 1. If you invest nothing, it's like infinity implied odds. You know, you're dividing by 0. So yeah, basically you can be really happy just checking here. Also, the cutoff's like a very passive fish, so he's going to actually check very often himself. If you are going to bet the turn, there's only one conceivable purpose for which you would do so, and that would be to make a kind of good odds providing blocking bet to stop the fish from betting big himself, so that you can improve again, like keep your implied odds reasonable, to see the next card, basically, and just invest like 250, give yourself like 5 to 1 just to see the next card. It's clearly plus EV. Hero bet 6 here, so that's just like, if you're going to bet, you don't bet that big, and I wouldn't bet anyway, because the cutoff does not seem like the kind of player who's likely to bomb the turn. If cutoff is going to bet the turn, like a 59-2 usually has pretty dreadful sense of bet sizing and is unaware of like the size of the pot and how big he's betting in relation to the pot. So I think it's really likely that the 59-2 is just going to bet like $2 or $3 here if he does bet. So why risk getting raised? Why open yourself up to getting raised by either player here? Don't even bother betting, but if you did bet, you should have bet much smaller. So hero bet 6 into 10.47 on the turn, and the cutoff calls. The river is the king of spades, which makes all his top pair now trips, which makes his sets boats, which makes his 2-pair boats. Hero quite rightly now checks the river and gives up. Oh, the small blind folded the turn, by the way. So hero quite rightly checks the river now and says, hey, I clearly have no fold equity against this player type. But I mean, Hero's line is just really contradictory to what he said pre-flop, because pre-flop, sorry for like totally tearing you apart here, Hero, it's just that I like to point out like every single spot where every single point in the hand or thought process where you've gone wrong, just so that I can teach everybody like the maximum here. Basically, I'm not doing it to be overly harsh, but you've said pre-flop that you don't think you have much fold equity in general against this player. I disagreed with that on the flop. I think that on many flops, sorry, not on this flop, but on many flops you will just have fold equity to c-bet had you ISO'd. But I think your point about having little fold equity on the later streets is definitely right, and so if you don't have fold equity on the turn, the last thing you want to do is just pile money in with just a flush draw. Like, you don't want to build the pot there in case you get there, because you get there hardly ever. You want to take a nice price so that when you do get there, you can still make a really big bet and make a lot of money, but you don't have to invest a lot. Now, when you get to the river, you realise that you don't have fold equity here anymore, and you check, but at that point, there should be some kind of warning signs going off that you've done a lot wrong in this hand to sort of get to a position where you've bloated a huge pot without fold equity at any point. The flop is not a terrible raise, but I do think it's a significant mistake. I think the turn is an even bigger mistake. I think the river is played perfectly. So I'm going to give you 1 out of 4 for playing that river awesomely. It's better than 0 out of 4, right? And we learned a hell of a lot going through that hand. So that's an interesting one. Cliff notes, general lessons you can extract there from that analysis. When you have a draw in a situation where fold equity is very limited and implied odds are very good, you want to favour implied odds and not fold equity. It's like if I gave you like 2 jars and one had like loads and loads and loads of, I don't know, like watches in it, like wrist watches, and the other one just had 1 gold bracelet. And the one jar has like 50 gold wrist watches and the other one has like 1 gold bracelet. You're not going to take the bracelet and expect it to be more valuable, right? You're going to take the thing that's more abundant, right? You're going to take the implied odds, you're going to take the watches, you're going to take whatever offering is more lucrative, basically. And implied odds are way more lucrative than fold equity here. They make you more money, they translate into much more EV, and that's just the right way to play the hand. So when you have a draw with limited fold equity but good implied odds, you go for the implied odds. You don't like go for fold equity. Pre-flop, when you have one really bad player and a less bad player in the pot, it doesn't really matter that player is slightly more stationary than the average fish. You're still going to get enough fold equity on the flop. You have a hand that's ahead of his range. You should raise. You should try and get that player to yourself. You shouldn't allow the small blind to just see the flop for free and realise loads of EV from the fish's mistakes. Those are your mistakes. You're the guy with the initiative and the uncapped range here. You're the one with A7 suited. You know, do something about it. Raise pre, isolate him, c-bet flops for half pot. Give yourself a really good price on the c-bet working. Like, don't worry about it. You're going to do absolutely fine there. On the turn, yeah, same kind of thing. When you've got very little fold equity but some implied odds, take the cheapest card that you can, and when it's checked to you, that happens to be for free, and the implied odds are infinite. River, yeah, always give up on board pairing rivers, especially, or non-texture changing rivers. Do not continue bluffs on either the turn or river against fish. In general, that's a very good rule. There are very few rules that can be applied that generally in poker, but that is pretty much one of them, because fish, unless you've got specific read that fish like think on a different level, like most fish will just be refusing to fold on textures that strengthen their range while not scaring anything at all on the board. So hopefully that hand analysis was useful. I'll be back next week with some more of this or something else, depending on what I decide is a good thing to do a podcast on. If you want to get in touch with me, guys, I'd love to keep hearing from you. Email me, admin@carrotcorner.com, with suggestions, feedback. If you're interested in coaching, I'm taking on students right now. If you're interested in reading a poker textbook that will hopefully allow you to beat No Limit Hold'em online, then pick up the Grinder's Manual at my website. So see you guys on the next one, and yeah, all feedback welcome. Thanks very much for watching or listening. Just buying time until I play my outro music, basically. All the best, guys.